like I think, main job, and we take ourselves as the watchdog in the business market.
Well, let's talk about censorship here for a moment, because here in the Mideast, and I don't live here in the Mideast, but it's very clear to me that there is self-censorship in a sense. And I want to ask you, Ihsan, why that is. My understanding is in the proposed media law, basically, if you write something that could harm the national economy, that you as a journalist could be in big trouble. To me, that is a very chilling thought, because if we want to try and learn things from what we did in this current crisis, you can't basically be handcuffing journalists.
Yeah, I think the reasons behind this phenomenon in the Middle East is that business and financial journalism is a new phenomenon in itself. It's I would say it's a couple of decades old, and so therefore, the sophisticated journalism in the Middle East is really political journalism, and there is obviously a lot of censorship in that arena. It's for many reasons, which we shouldn't go into now. And so basically business journalism here now in the Middle East has inherited that as things have moved from the political side to the business side. So we see a lot of self-censorship out there in newspapers and other media.
But there's a lot of fear also. I mean, absolutely, because of the fear of, you have national economic interests out here. Dubai, for instance, wants to be portrayed as a world-class economy. It's clear that there was a huge real estate bubble here that has crashed, and I think Dubai, as a government, is trying to do a public relations campaign to try and counter that. And I think journalists sometimes feel intimidated. Now, some of what I read in the press this morning I thought was very open. But quite frankly, a year ago when I was here, it was very tough to find anything, even though the bubble had already happened.
Well, I could report from our angle, if you like, that we've been okay. I mean, nobody has given us any problems. I mean, I think if media gets rid of the self-censorship that they a lot of the times they practice, they will be pleasantly surprised. Having said that, there is, on the other side of the fence, we haven't been encouraged either to do more and more investigative journalism. I mean, our platform does a bit of two things. It does a little bit of investigative journalism, especially when it comes to corporate governance issues and conflict of interest and so forth. And we also provide an independent platform for people to voice their voice, to voice their opinion, the professionals specifically. So we haven't had problems, but we haven't had encouragement either. And I think the recent media law is a little bit put things in a big gray area, because it's. I mean, I can understand the motivation behind it from the country level, but I don't think it'll help the self-censorship issue.
Stephen, from your perspective, and then Martha has a comment. Yeah.
Well, I think there's enough vagary and ambiguity in the media law to encourage self-censorship. Not knowing where the lines are encourages one to stand behind them and not test the waters. For the most part at CNBC, we're in a happy position in this way. I've never been communicated with, never been contacted in any form, never been leaned on in any way. But I think that's precisely because we don't make up the numbers in the stock market. We don't issue the company reports. We're analyzing and reporting on, but not actually making these things up as we go along. So where would we fall afoul of it? But there is a distinct lack of transparency, which I'm rather hoping that when all of this shakes out, there will be a very clear view of a need for greater transparency, not just talking about transparency, but achieving it.
How do you think, though, if the markets here evolve, become deeper and so forth, do you think that will help transparency?
Well, I think it's bound to. The markets, the regional markets are immature, really a few years old, and starting in great measure with 2004, 2005, with the boom. There was a setback in 2006 and then a further boom, but we're looking at only a handful of years. For what it's worth, media and business media in this part of the world has grown with the markets. It's also a new phenomenon. It doesn't have the aged perspective that European media or even American media will have.
Martha, you wanted to make a point about this idea of sort of self-censorship, because in the West we have a very different view of it, but we're operating under a very different set of guidelines.
Well, I'd feel remiss if I didn't mention the forms that self-censorship takes in the United States, where it's often you don't want to burn a source. You know, if you're getting behind-the-scenes comments from Alan Greenspan, you're going to be very careful about what you say about Alan Greenspan. And there's also the self-censorship that comes from not wanting to look silly in front of your peers. So if you've written about the housing bubble over the last couple of years and you want to write about it again, you run the risk of being sort of laughed at because it never happens.
But the point that you're making right here is, and I think this is something that we learned, you know, we thought that Alan Greenspan, in a sense, you know, he was quote unquote the maestro, a god, knew exactly what he was doing. He had a fundamental belief in the capital markets and so forth, and he proved to be wrong. And I don't think that we, as people in the media, are questioning enough of what he was doing. Stephen, your thoughts?
Well, I think that may well be true, but there are people who are brighter and sharper and have more experience than the rest of us who have gotten it wrong. And I think we've all made mistakes. The important bit is to actually learn from our mistakes and move on.
But I want to get into lessons later, but how do you think we've really learned, you know, from this in terms of being more questioning? Because I don't see us, in a sense, being more questioning. What I see going on right now is you have a crisis, the crisis breaks, and then there's a lot of great journalism happens post-crisis. There was great journalism before, but they weren't able to connect all the dots. It always seems like we're fighting the last war instead of anticipating it.
We actually took the lead in Arabic news back in the summer when we saw foreign liquidity draining out of the regional markets. Now, there was a lot of talk about that there would be no decoupling here, that we would be protected, sheltered, and so forth, as would perhaps India, China. And we discovered that that wasn't true. And we took an early-ish lead in trying to analyze, which we did over the course of the month of September, so early-ish on, but have made our best effort at it, and I think done reasonably well.
Martha, you wanted to make a point to this, and Mohammed, yeah.
I don't know about the media in the Middle East, but in my part of the world, which is Southeast Asia, there is a lot of self-censoring going on, because media is largely government mode or government controlled, and there is a tendency to sort of downplay the negative news and then play up the positive news. And the emphasis is on the feel-good effect. And when someone makes negative remarks, is accused of playing down the economy or talking down the economy, for example. So this is something that is a fact of life in our part of the world. But that thing is beginning to disappear now because of the emergence of other, cyberspace media, internet media, and so on and so forth. So therefore, the capacity for mainstream media to underreport certain things is, I think, very much eroded by the emergence of internet media, which are now stealing the show. So they have to come up and catch up with the rest. And I think this is something that is going to fade away in the near future.
Exactly. I met a Malaysian journalist working for online media. He told me exactly the same thing. I think for journalists like us, we are living in China, we used to stay in a very strict censorship situation. So, but China is changing and getting more and more liberalized. So the way for journalists there in China, our mentality is we don't think, oh, what we cannot do. We just think what we can do. With enough courage and professionalism we have, we just do what we can do. And we find a lot of spaces. And we feel there are more news than journalists, and there are more news than media. And we feel like that is a way. Always we can do a lot, and without the care, without the concerns, that much concerns about censorship.
I think this is a very interesting point that Shuli is making and that Ehsan made. They are both independent, all right? And they both say, despite the stories that they write about, that they have not faced government wrath.
That's
That's right. And you're saying the biggest fear for people here in the Mideast to overcome or in Dubai is they shouldn't fear self-censorship because it leads to that censorship, and they might find out something differently if they didn't have that censorship.
That's right.
Todd, there is another